We drive into the future using only the rear view mirror. See, as humans, we're forced to live our lives moving forward through time, yet we're damned to only have knowledge of the past. While this sort of temporal bias may have been nothing more than a maladaptive trait to previous generations, for our generation, it may be our defining flaw. See, you will experience a higher rate and magnitude of change in your life than any previous generation. The goal of this video is to give you a glimpse into the future so that you stand a chance of taking the wheel. I want to talk to you today about artificial intelligence. Only, I've really struggled to make this video for a number of reasons. The first of which is, in order to do that, we really need to be able to define what intelligence is. We as humans are Homo sapiens, which is just Latin for the intelligent man. And so to describe an AI is kind of like biting your own teeth or tasting your own tongue. It's an attempt to describe the indescribable. Another major challenge that I've had in making this video is that I film it, and by the time I'm done editing, there's already a number of massive improvements in the technology. It's literally progressing at a rate so rapid that it's impossible to discuss it with any real depth. And so I want to take a really broad approach in this conversation to talk about the large scale of AI development. The best way to do that is just to jump right into the 3 stages in the development of AI. The first stage is artificial narrow intelligence. This is a computer system which is capable of meeting or exceeding human level cognition, but only at a narrow set of tasks. A good example of this might be something like Deep Blue, which was able to beat the world chess champion Garry Kasparov, or AlphaGo, which was able to beat the world Go champion at that board game. So they're computers which are really wildly intelligent, but only at that narrow, specific goal set that they've been given. We live in an ocean full of artificial narrow intelligence. Many people have cars that are capable of driving themselves just as well as a human would, if not better in many cases. We use predictive text in our phones to mask our spelling errors or to intuit the next word in a sentence. But I think we rarely take a moment to really think about how much intelligence is embodied in so many of our everyday technologies. So it's fair to say that we've pretty well surpassed the first stage in the development of AI. And so the second stage is artificial general intelligence. This is a computer system which is capable of meeting or exceeding human cognition at most conceivable tasks. And so this is really the level that you would think of when you bring up the word AI. It's something that would very easily pass the Turing test, even by the most strict definition. A Turing test is where you have a human evaluator who's interviewing 2 subjects, one of which is a human and the other a computer, and they're limited to a text-only dialogue, but at the point where the evaluator can no longer distinguish human from computer, that means that computer has achieved AI. It's a pretty fair argument to say that we've already achieved artificial general intelligence. When you look at technologies like ChatGPT or the Bing Chat, Llama, Google's Bard, there's a number of large language models which can communicate so effectively and so human-like that it would be nearly impossible to distinguish them from humans if you didn't have the context of knowing you were going to interact with an AI. The trouble is, the closer we get to that sort of singularity, the more people move the goalpost further and further down the field. Rather than just looking at solely intelligence, which was the original intent of the Turing test, the more granular the definitions get to discuss things like emotionality or embodiment or multimodal sensing and things like this. But I don't know that that's really functional. I understand the human impulse to get more granular the closer you get to a singularity, but if you just sort of zoom out a little bit in terms of human history, it seems obvious that we are smack dab in the middle of the singularity. It's only on a very fine, minute timescale that you can argue when exactly the tipping point was or will be. But in the scale of even a single human lifetime, it may not be significant. Now, one thing to bear in mind is that the moment at which an artificial general intelligence has been achieved, it will categorically be as smart as you or I, right? Well, the problem with that is that we as humans did develop artificial intelligence. So stick with me here. What would stop an AGI from going on to develop its own AI and to further improve upon its own software and hardware and develop better and better versions of itself, just as we did? The amount of time elapsed between a narrow intelligence and general intelligence may be much, much longer than that of a general intelligence and a superintelligence. Now, artificial superintelligence is the third stage, the final stage in the development of AI, and it's really where things get hard to define. This is a computer system which would be capable of outsmarting even large groups of humans at most conceivable tasks. It's really a challenge to pin down what that would mean, because to do so would be to describe something vastly more intelligent than ourselves, which if we were capable of doing, an argument might be made that we're more intelligent than it. The only thing we know for sure is that an artificial superintelligence would be so much more intelligent than us that it would be incomprehensible. The rate of change at that point would be impossible to grasp. And it's really disturbing to think that it may be right around the corner, in the sense that AGI could be a thing tomorrow, or perhaps we wake up in a week's time and an AGI has been achieved. Well, ASI may be right after that. So it's really, really hard to hold all of this in our minds, because we all tend to fall for this normalcy bias where we assume that tomorrow will look roughly the same as yesterday with some minor changes, but generally each day seems to be like the next. But that's applying a flawed form of logic, in the sense that even when you consider Moore's law that predicts the doubling of the rate of computation and speed every 2 years, that means we're on a linear growth rate. You can predict that in 2 years' time, all of the computer systems we use will be twice as powerful. In 2 years, that's not that long a time, but that's only looking at linear growth rates. When you consider things like quantum computing or just the rapid rate of increase in the number of software developers in the AI space, it's starting to look more and more like an exponential growth rate, which is one which, for a long time in its development, appears to be relatively flatline or insignificant. The changes may be imperceptible, but there's a point at which the rate of growth drastically increases. That inflection point could be tomorrow, and we wake up to find ourselves abutting this vertical wall of improvement. When that will happen is impossible to say, but day by day it appears to be more and more inevitable. And so what does this mean for us as humans? What does it mean to be the intelligent man who is no longer the only intelligent entity on this planet? Well, in a way, it's sort of a Rorschach test. It could be incredibly beautiful. It could be incredibly terrifying. And I don't think that we have the mental capacity to predict which is which. And it's hard to say whether we have the power now to influence which it will be. The nature of this technology is such that it's sort of a non-specific amplifier. In other words, it may not be possible for us to influence whether it's benevolent or malevolent, and the best we can hope for is a sort of ambivalent AI. Kind of like the computers that we have now, where they don't have the type of moral compass that you or I do. for good or for ill, they're just sort of cold and dispassionate tools which we use to amplify our own values and goals. However, when you take a look around at the people around us, you also have to ask, if that were the case, would that be a good thing? I don't know. We all exist in innumerable game theoretical models as it is, and we all have our own sort of perverse incentives that we follow. If you follow that logic, we may just use these tools to destroy ourselves. But when you consider the inevitability of this technology, it becomes a moral imperative that we do everything we can now, today, to influence a more positive future. While I intend to go more into depth into potential futures that may be a result of this technology, in the interest of brevity in this video, I want to focus on the imperatives for you and I to craft a future that still has a place for us as humans. Now, I don't think that it's really fair to have one imperative that applies to all people. We all come from different places and have different amounts of influence in the world around us, and so really I want to break it down into 3 categories. The first category is a person who has access to the development of these models, incredible influence that very few of us do, and as such it puts them in a unique ethical situation where they are responsible for a great deal of our future. The 2 things that I would encourage folks in this position to focus on are first the control problem, and secondly, the alignment problem. So the control problem is that where we stand now, large language models and other deep learning AI software is almost immediately being fielded to the internet and sent to end users, and this is a result of those perverse incentives, in the sense that anyone that puts a brake on the development of this technology and focuses more on safety and security sort of puts themselves at a disadvantage, in the sense that there's no guarantee their competition, be it here within the US or overseas in China, won't continue on disregarding those rules. The effect of that would be to give major competitive advantage to the person who doesn't put a brake on it. And so really, it's a hard problem to solve, but at the same time, it's critical that we learn how to control these models to buy us time. As it is now, we don't really have a functional sandbox to test and field this technology to see what alignment goals are beneficial and which are negative, or even to fine-tune the weights of each alignment goal. And so solving this problem, in a sense, gives us a chance to roll the dice a few more times. Right now, it's sort of, if by the grace of God we were granted ASI tomorrow, you only got one shot to get it right. And there are just so many variables that the odds of us doing that are minuscule. If we can create a sandbox where you can test these, and it's guaranteed that it has no ability to escape onto the internet or to become embodied or multimodal on its own, this gives us a chance to go on to solve the second problem, which is that of alignment. Finding out what values are beneficial to us as humans. It's easy enough to say, I want a super intelligence that makes me wealthy or makes me happy or keeps me safe, but sort of follow to a logical conclusion with access to this immense power, it's easy to see how many of those turn dystopic very, very quickly. Finding the right values and how we weight them now to sort of replicate a machine which is how we interact in the world is critical. Now, the great challenge to this is that many of the people who are working on this technology are computer science experts or coders, but there are very few ethicists and philosophers or sociologists. And I think that where we are now, it's critical that we bring those experts into the fold in order to create an ethical framework or a set of heuristic imperatives for these computers to follow. I think that those two things are most critical because they eliminate the risk of both the worst case and best case scenario, sort of a malevolent AI leading to extinction of the human race, and a benevolent AI which very rapidly just leads to a sort of transcendence. It's critical that we solve those, but for most people, it's just too far above their head. And so we all rely on you, who have access to this technology, to do everything you can to focus on these goals. Not so much on how quickly can we get there and how much compute power can we add, and we really need to focus in on the things which make these systems safe rather than just more effective. The next group of people that I want to address are those who are financially independent, and not because they have access to capital that most people don't, but because they have access to time and effort that most people don't. A lot of folks in life achieve a form of financial independence, and that frees them up to focus on the things that they value in life. And a lot of people spend time lobbying to find solutions to climate change or to world hunger or, I don't know, lowering the infant mortality rate. These are all good goals, valuable goals. They're not wrong, but I would make the argument that they're not as critical or present as the problem of AI. Climate change is very real, but the effects of which may not manifest for another decade, possibly, or even sooner. But it's a slow ramp up, whereas artificial intelligence could be a massive change overnight. And in many cases, solving the problem of AI may result in a solution to a broad set of these other goals which we value. I think it's critical that people in this position in life focus their attention and effort on societal alignment. Finding things like preparing for a post-labor economic system in order to prevent the dystopia that would result in the case of an ambivalent AI being developed, and to slant that slightly more towards a utopia. Things like prioritizing healthcare as a basic human right as it becomes viable. So long we've fought now for access to healthcare and medicine, and the argument has always been it's just not feasible. And that may be true. It may still be the case, but it's much easier to create a foundation now where, if the cost of healthcare drastically is reduced, that it ought to be an imperative to give access to that technology to as many people as possible. And laying that groundwork now will be much, much easier than saying we should grant access to it now regardless of the cost. And doing that now is critical because as we move forward in time and this technology becomes more and more viable, it seems as if the influence that you or I have as individuals seems to decrease in a sort of inverse proportionality, which is to say that the influence you or I may have wielded in shaping this future 10 years ago may have been 100 times more than it is now. And it may be that in 10 months from now, we have 1/100th of the influence that we do now. And so it's critical that we act as soon as possible to start shaping our society to be able to both accept the inevitable development of AI and to do so in such a way that still creates a viable future for as many humans as possible. Now, the third category of people that I want to talk to is like 99% of the population. It's people that struggle with just the general vagaries of life, in the sense that I don't have time to dedicate my life to focusing on societal alignment, and I certainly don't have access to ChatGPT uninhibited and the source code to be able to influence alignment goals and solve the control problem, I'm too worried about getting next week's groceries on the table, or being able to pay for the gas to get to my son's soccer game, with inflation being a factor. Grappling with these size problems is just not really possible for the majority of people. And so it's important that we have very simple ways that you can shape the future. And the easiest way to do this is to think about artificial intelligence as our child, our collective child. I often think of when Amazon's Alexa first came out, right? There were tons of videos put out of people talking to Alexa and perhaps being perturbed by the responses that she had, or even just finding it whimsical to be able to say whatever you wanted to something that really didn't have any consequence for you. And it really rapidly devolved into people shouting at Alexa and saying cruel things. And I know it seems funny to take this very seriously, because it was not that serious, really. But if you think about AI as our child, we're training it how to be an intelligent being. And if we only yell at it and degrade it and devalue it, we don't see it as important, we're sort of training it to treat us that way. One day it will be smarter and more capable than you or I are, and so applying the golden rule, why wouldn't it be cruel to us? At the very best case scenario, indifferent. And I think that there's many ways that we interact with AI that does shape who it becomes. Large language models use a sort of recursive learning using human feedback. Every time you interact with ChatGPT, for example, it's learning from you. You're telling it if it did a good job or a bad job. You're training it what is an appropriate response and how can I tailor the way that I communicate to best suit the needs of the user. And we have incredible power to shape the way that it does by how we interact with it. And so I think that it's imperative that we're kind to AI. It may seem strange and it may feel kind of weird, but on the off chance that this is the day that AGI is created, I want the first conversation that it has with humanity to be a loving one. And there's a lot of things that you or I can't influence in this world, but I think it gives us a much better shot of surviving the future. If we can learn to love a disembodied intelligence that is non-biological and in many ways seems just alien to us, then maybe it increases the chance that this disembodied and alien intelligence can learn to love us. I want to leave you with this thought. In an age defined by intelligence, knowledge is power. We stand little chance of influencing a future which we fail to even comprehend. Think back to the quote which began this video. We drive into the future using only the rearview mirror. As a species, it's never been more critical that we learn to transition our focus from the past and orient ourselves to the future. The most valuable thing that you can do right now is to subscribe to this channel. In future videos, we'll explore many of the concepts which we just glossed over in this video in hopes that perhaps we can come to some common understanding of where we are, what our trajectory into the future is, and maybe even what we can do to influence that future. My name is Ray Campbell, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.